My name is Mabel Jennings. I'm 84 years old. I've lived a long, quiet life in a small town just outside of Topeka, Kansas. Most folks around here know me as the lady who grows hydrangeas, bakes too many pies, and always leaves the porch light on, just in case someone needs a safe place to land. I've been a widow for 16 years now. My husband George passed peacefully in his sleep, and I thought the worst pain of my life had come and gone with him. I truly believed the years ahead would be spent in quiet reflection, gardening, knitting, and spoiling my grandkids whenever they visited. But I was wrong. So wrong. You see, my stepson Dale moved back into my house about 6 months ago. He was George's son from his first marriage. Never close to me, but polite enough. After he lost his job in the city and claimed he had nowhere else to go, I said yes. Out of love for his father. Out of mercy. I invited him in, gave him my spare room, and treated him like family. I never imagined that kindness would lead to the darkest day of my life. It happened on a Sunday. A beautiful Sunday. The kind of day you'd take a picture of and send to someone with the words, "Wish you were here." The church service had just ended. I wore my best blue dress, the one with the little white lace on the collar. Everyone was smiling. Pastor John had preached about forgiveness that morning. Funny, how that word suddenly meant something very different to me just a few hours later. Dale offered to walk me home from church. Said he wanted to talk. We walked slowly the way older folks do, arm in arm, his hand gripping my elbow. First it felt sweet, protective. But once the front door closed behind us, everything changed. I can't tell you every detail. Not yet. Hurts too much. But what I will say is this. Dale did something no man should ever do to any woman, let alone his own stepmother. Right there in my home. In the daylight. After church. He thought I was weak. He thought I wouldn't speak. That I'd keep it buried like some dusty old photograph from the attic. But he was wrong. Oh, so wrong. Because the woman he hurt isn't the woman who stayed silent. The woman he hurt is the one who would make him regret the day he crossed her. I didn't just survive what he did. Took revenge. Not the kind that lands you in jail. The kind that makes a man sit alone in the dark, questioning every step he took, wondering how he didn't see it coming. But before I tell you how I turned the tables on him, I want you to do me a favor. If you're still with me right now, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Like this story if it's already got you hooked. And turn on your notifications so you never miss a chapter. I've got more stories like this, real, raw, and emotional. And before you scroll away, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know who's out there with me listening to my story. Now back to what happened. That same Sunday evening, as the sun was setting behind the trees, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and a plan. Dale thought he had broken me, but I was just getting started. The tea had gone cold in my hands, but I didn't move. I just sat there, staring out the window as the golden sun melted behind the trees. Everything outside looked peaceful. Birds were settling into their nests. Children were riding bikes down the lane. But inside me, a storm had begun. I could still feel the tremble in my bones from what happened that afternoon. Every time I blinked, I saw Dale's eyes, cold, smug, filled with something evil. Something that should never belong in any man, let alone one who called me Mom out of convenience. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was past crying. I was past asking, why me? I knew men like Dale didn't stop unless someone made them stop. And I, Mabel Jennings, had lived too long to sit quietly while someone took my safety, my dignity, my peace. Still, I didn't act right away. I needed to think. Plan. You see, when you're an old woman, folks assume you're slow, harmless, invisible. But that's the thing about women like me. We've watched the world longer than most. We've learned how to wait, how to strike when it matters most. I watched Dale over the next few days. I said nothing, cleaned, smiled even. Just enough to make him think I was broken inside, that I'd let it go. He didn't apologize. Not once. In fact, he got bolder. He started drinking in the house, leaving empty beer cans on my porch steps. He even invited one of his strange friends over. A man named Russ with yellow eyes and a handshake that felt like holding onto something dead. I stayed in my room those nights, locked the door, prayed harder than I ever had before. But I was also listening. One night, I overheard them talking in the living room while I pretended to sleep. Dale was laughing, bragging. He said things like, "She's just an old lady. What's she gonna do? And worse, she's not gonna last much longer anyway. Maybe I'll get the house when she's gone." I pressed my hand to my chest. Not from fear but from rage. The kind that starts deep like fire under your ribs. He didn't just want to silence me. He wanted to replace me. The next morning I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled down the attic stairs, climbed up slowly, and opened a trunk I hadn't touched since George died. Inside was a small wooden box. Old, dusty, but still locked. I opened it with the tiny key I kept on a chain around my neck. And there it was. My little black book. Not one with numbers. Not money. Not secrets from a soap opera. This was something different. It held the names of people I had helped. People who owed me favors. You see, years ago, I wasn't just a church-going housewife. I was a hospice nurse. The kind who stayed with families in their darkest hour. The one who held hands when the machines beeped slower and slower. I saw grief. I saw death. But I also saw life. And in that life I made connections. There was Sheila, the daughter of a judge. There was Thomas, a retired private investigator. And most importantly, there was Ruth Ann, a woman who once told me, "If you ever need someone who can make a man disappear, you call me." I never forgot that. Now, I wasn't about to kill Dale. No. That would make me like him. But I was going to do something far worse. I was going to make him live with what he did. Every day. Publicly. Shamefully. But before I could make my first move, something unexpected happened. Dale received a letter. One he didn't expect. He opened it at the table. I was standing by the sink, drying dishes when I saw his face drain of all color. "What's wrong?" I asked gently. He looked up, lips trembling. This can't be real," he muttered. He stuffed the letter into his coat pocket and stormed out of the house. Smiled. He didn't know it yet, but that was the first thread in the web I was spinning. And once it started to unravel, there'd be no way out. Dale didn't come home that night. I sat on the porch, wrapped in my shawl, watching the moon drift behind the clouds. The house was quiet, too quiet. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange kind of peace. Not joy, not comfort, but stillness. The kind that comes before a storm hits full force. I knew where he'd gone. He always ran to the bar downtown when he didn't want to face something. But that letter shook him more than I expected. And it should have. You see, that letter wasn't just any letter. It was the beginning of my plan. It was a certified envelope from a law firm. I asked my old friend Sheila, now a practicing estate lawyer in Oklahoma, to help me craft it. Inside, it stated that I was legally revising my will and had reason to believe a certain individual living in my household was emotionally unfit to remain on the property. It didn't name Dale. But it didn't have to. The paper said there would be a full mental wellness evaluation of the household within the next 10 days. That's all it took to rattle him. When he finally stumbled in the next morning, smelling like whiskey and old smoke, he didn't say a word to me. He just slammed his bedroom door and stayed inside all day. But let him stew. Let him sweat. I spent that day preparing. I went out to the garden, trimmed my roses, waved to the neighbors like everything was fine. But in my mind I was sewing a trap. One careful stitch at a time. I called Thomas next. My retired private investigator friend from Tulsa. Quiet man. Professional. Discreet. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly a decade, but he remembered me right away. "You once held my mama's hand while she took her last breath," he said gently. "What can I do for you, Ms. Mabel?" I told him everything. The abuse, the threats, the drinking, the disrespect. I didn't cry. I just laid it all out like cold laundry on a line. Then I said 5 simple words. I want it on tape. There was silence on the line for a moment. Then he said, "I'll send the equipment by Friday." The plan was falling into place. But something unexpected happened before Friday came. Dale brought home a woman. She was younger, maybe in her 30s, pretty in a lost sort of way. Too thin, nervous eyes. She didn't say much when I offered her tea. Just sat on the couch like a ghost, fiddling with the strings of her purse. Her name was Lacey. She called Dale babe, and he grunted back at her like an animal. I knew what she was. Distraction. Maybe a shield. Maybe someone to make himself look normal if people started asking questions. But I saw through it. That night, while Dale was passed out in his room, Lacey tiptoed into the kitchen. I was already there, pretending to look for my sleeping pills. She jumped when she saw me. "Oh, I didn't mean to wake you," she whispered. "You didn't," I said. "You couldn't. Not tonight." We stood there a moment in silence. Then she looked at me, eyes full of something sadder than fear. "Has he ever hurt you?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Just stared at the little crack in the tile near the sink. Then I looked up and said, "You don't have to stay here, sweetheart. There's still time to leave before it gets worse." She looked like she might cry. Then she just nodded and walked back down the hallway. I didn't know it then, but that little moment, that small crack in Dale's control, would be the start of something bigger. Lacey wasn't just a lost girl. She was my second key, and I was about to use her. But first, I had to catch Dale doing something he couldn't talk his way out of. And when that moment came, even the devil himself would have looked away. By Friday morning, the package from Thomas had arrived. Inside were 2 small wireless cameras, barely the size of a button. One disguised as a smoke detector. The other, a tiny motion-activated device built into what looked like an old radio clock. Both perfect for someone like me. Someone who needed to gather proof without ever raising suspicion. I installed the smoke detector in the hallway outside Dale's bedroom, right above the picture of George and me on our wedding day. The other camera I tucked inside the guest bathroom, strategically placed to capture Dale's comings and goings without invading privacy. I wanted to trap a predator, not become one. By sunset the devices were working. And now I waited. Dale had no idea what was happening around him. That's what arrogance does to a man. It blinds him. He thought I was weak. Thought the silence meant submission. He couldn't see the fire beneath my calm. But someone else was beginning to notice. Lacey. She stayed another night, and this time she didn't avoid me. In fact, she lingered in the kitchen while I made breakfast. I handed her a warm muffin, and we stood in silence for a while. Then she spoke. "You're not like the other women," she said softly. I glanced at her. "What do you mean?" She sighed, looking down. "The ones Dale brings around. They're loud, tired, or too scared to speak. But you watch everything." I smiled, not with joy but with understanding. "I've lived long enough to know when the wind's about to change," I said. She nodded, then surprised me with a question. "Can I help you?" That stopped me cold. "You want to help me?" I asked, trying to hide the emotion in my voice. She looked ashamed. "I've seen him hurt people, Mabel. I thought he'd change with me. But he hasn't. If anything, he's worse." I reached over and touched her hand. "You're not too late, Lacey. But I need you to be sure. Because once this starts, there's no going back." She didn't hesitate. "I'm sure." And just like that I had an ally. That evening, while Dale was out, probably scheming or drinking, Lacey and I sat together and watched the footage from the hallway camera. And what we saw chilled me to the bone. It wasn't just Dale sneaking around. It was what he said, alone, thinking no one was listening. "She'll be gone soon," he muttered under his breath, staring at my photo. "Once she slips up, it's mine. The house, the money, everything." Lacey gasped beside me. "Pause the video." He had a plan. He wasn't just cruel, he was calculating. He wanted me out of the picture. And now I had proof. We sent the footage to Thomas. He said it was enough to start the next phase. But we needed one final push. one final piece to expose him completely. So we created a scenario. Lacey would provoke Dale. Gently, carefully. She'd ask about the house. About me. Just enough to make him boil. And I'd be ready, Cameron. It was dangerous. But I wasn't afraid. Because I wasn't just an old woman with good intentions. I was a survivor with a strategy. That night, Lacey made her move. And what happened in that living room changed everything. Dale's voice turned into a growl. He grabbed her arm hard. Threw a glass at the wall. Called me names I'd never heard in my life. Threatened to make sure the old lady doesn't wake up one morning. But this time, the camera was rolling. And this time, the world would see. The next morning I made my calls. To Sheila. Thomas. To Pastor John. And finally to the police. I didn't shake when I picked up the phone. I didn't stutter. I didn't cry. I dialed the local police station and asked to speak directly to Officer Braden Mallory. He wasn't just a name in the yellow pages. He was the son of a woman I once cared for during her last days. I remembered him bringing her flowers and sitting beside her bed, holding her frail hand and praying out loud when the nurses had all gone quiet. When he answered, his voice was calm and respectful. Ms. Mabel. It's been a while. Everything all right? Pause. Then, in a voice even I barely recognized, I said, No, Braden. It's not. I have something to show you. And I need your help. He arrived 2 hours later. Unmarked car. No sirens. Just him in plain clothes, standing on my porch with a clipboard and eyes that held real concern. He stepped inside and I poured him a cup of tea just like old times. Then I handed him the flash drive. He plugged it into his laptop right there at my kitchen table and watched the footage from the night before. He didn't speak until it ended. He just closed the laptop slowly, his jaw tight. Mabel, he said quietly. This is serious. I know, I replied. Do you want to press charges? I want him gone, I said. And I want people to know what he is. So he doesn't do this again. Not to me. Not to anyone. Braden nodded. I'll handle it, he promised. But you need to stay out of the house while we do this. It's safer that way. So I left. Lacey and I packed a small overnight bag. I took my wedding ring, my Bible, and a photo of George. We checked into the old Fairview Inn just outside of town. Room 2B. The same room George and I stayed in during our first year of marriage, when the pipes burst in our house and we lived there for 2 weeks. Funny how life circles back when you least expect it. The next day the trap snapped shut. The police came while Dale was still asleep. Braden later told me he was half naked and yelling when they entered his room. They found the broken glass, the bruises on Lacey's arm, the cameras, the recordings, and even a notebook in his drawer listing steps to gain control of my finances. It was all there. All of it. He was arrested on the spot. For assault, for threats, and for coercion of a vulnerable adult. The news spread fast. In a town like ours, gossip traveled faster than truth. But this time they were one and the same. I didn't hide. I went back to church that Sunday, wearing that same blue dress, head held high. Pastor John met me at the door and wrapped me in the kind of hug that didn't need words. That night I sat in my favorite chair, sipping tea by the window. Lacey was gone. She'd left town to stay with her sister in Missouri. But before she left, she hugged me tightly and whispered, You saved me, Mabel. No, child. You saved yourself. But I'll admit, it felt good to be the kind of woman who helped light the way. That next morning a letter came in the mail. From a women's shelter in Wichita. One of the workers had heard about my story from the local paper. They asked if I'd consider speaking at one of their support groups. Me. An old woman with tired eyes and shaky hands. They wanted to hear my voice. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to use it. Because this wasn't just about Dale anymore. This was about every woman who thought she was too old, too small, too forgotten to fight back. We are not invisible. We are not powerless. We are not done. But even with Dale behind bars, I knew it wasn't over. Because one evening while cleaning out his old room, I found something tucked deep inside a pillowcase. Flash drive. And what was on it made my blood run cold. It wasn't just about me. He had done this before. I held that flash drive in my hand like it was on fire. It felt heavier than it should have. Colder too. Like it carried something rotten. Something waiting to be uncovered. My fingers trembled as I walked it into the living room, where my old laptop sat on the side table. I hadn't used it in months, but it still worked. I plugged the flash drive in, clicked the first folder, and braced myself. The screen blinked once, then opened to a list of names. Women's names. Some I didn't know. Others I vaguely remembered. Faces I had seen come and go from Dale's life over the years. One name stood out to me immediately. Christina. Christina was the woman before Lacey. She stayed here for just 2 weeks last summer. Quiet girl. Wore long sleeves in the middle of July. I remembered thinking something felt off. She never met my eyes, always flinched when Dale walked into the room. She left one morning before sunrise. No goodbye. No note. Now I knew why. There were videos, emails, voice recordings, all catalogued, labeled by name, and organized by date. It was like he'd kept trophies. Evidence of every woman he'd manipulated, hurt, threatened. Some of it couldn't even watch. I didn't need to. My stomach told me everything I needed to know. Dale hadn't just hurt me. He had a history. He was a predator. And now I had his entire past in my hands. I took a deep breath, then called Braden again. When I told him what I found, he asked me to bring it in right away. "We're reopening 2 cold cases because of you, Mabel," he said. "You have no idea how far this might go." But I did. Because evil doesn't start in a day. Builds, grows, spreads like mold in the dark. And Dale had been spreading it for years. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow pad of paper and started writing letters. One to Christina if I could find her. One to Lacey. One to Dale's biological mother, a woman I hadn't spoken to in nearly 3 decades. I remembered her from George's funeral. She had stood off to the side, crying into a lace handkerchief. She looked like a woman carrying guilt. And now I wondered if she had known who her son really was. When I was finished, I lit a candle by the window. A symbol, I suppose. For every woman who had walked away from Dale Jennings and carried the shame he should have held. The next day, the district attorney's office called. They had opened a formal investigation into Dale's past, and they asked if I'd be willing to testify when the time came. "I'm not as sharp as I once was," I said softly. "But I'll speak. I'll stand. I'll tell every word I remember." "You'd be helping more people than you can imagine," the voice replied. But deep down, I didn't do it for people. I did it for me. For the part of me that once believed I was too old, too small, too late to fight back. For the woman I used to be. And for the woman I had become. Still, I wasn't prepared for what happened next. A few days later, a brown envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Showed Dale, younger, standing beside a much older woman in a hospital room. And scribbled on the back in faded black ink were the words, "She wasn't the first. He learned from the best." I dropped the photo. The blood in my veins turned cold. Because I recognized the woman beside him. It wasn't just a stranger. It was someone from George's past. And suddenly I realized, Dale wasn't born a monster. He was raised by one. I stared at that photo for a long time. It was old, yellowed around the edges. The kind of photo you find buried in an attic or pressed between pages of a forgotten book. But the faces in it were sharp, unmistakable. Dale stood on the left, maybe 15 or 16 years old. His arm slung carelessly over the shoulder of a woman I never thought I'd see again. Virginia Harper, George's ex-wife, Dale's birth mother. I hadn't laid eyes on her since the day she showed up at George's funeral, face sunken, clutching that little lace handkerchief like a lifeline. She hadn't spoken to anyone, not even Dale. She just stood by the trees, watching from a distance. But now, this photograph painted a far darker picture. In the image, Virginia smiled, but it wasn't warm. It wasn't motherly. It was cold, controlled. Her eyes weren't looking at the camera. They were staring off to the side, focused on something I couldn't see. And Dale. His smile didn't reach his eyes. That same emptiness he carried into adulthood was already there, even as a boy. On the back of the photo, those 7 words burned into my mind like a brand. She wasn't the first. He learned from the best. Sent a chill through me. Had I been wrong about Dale? Had I been fighting a battle that started long before I ever entered the picture? I needed answers. I needed the truth. I dug through the box where I kept old letters and phone numbers, the kind people wrote down in the days before smartphones. And there it was, scribbled in George's handwriting. Virginia. Westbrook Senior Facility. Wichita. I didn't hesitate. The next morning I drove the 2 hours to Wichita in my old Buick, hands trembling on the steering wheel the entire way. I hadn't made a trip that long in years. But some journeys are too important to skip. Westbrook was a quiet place. Pale pink brick, wide porches, rocking chairs lined up like sentinels. The nurse at the front desk blinked when I gave her the name. "She doesn't get visitors," she said softly. "Are you family?" "No," I replied. "I'm her son's stepmother." The nurse raised her eyebrows but didn't ask questions. She simply led me down a hallway that smelled of bleach and sadness. Virginia's room was at the end. Room 208. I knocked once. No answer. I stepped inside. There she was, propped up in a chair by the window, a wool blanket draped over her knees. Thinner than I remembered. Her once dark hair now pure silver, twisted into a tight bun. She turned slowly toward me, and for a moment, her eyes flickered with recognition. "Mabel Jennings," she rasped. "You remember me," I said, surprised. She gave a dry chuckle. "Hard to forget the woman who took my husband." I didn't argue. I didn't come for that. "I came to ask about Dale," I said gently. "I found an old photo of the 2 of you." Something in her eyes changed. Hardened. "You found that photo?" "Yes." Silence filled the room. Then she said it, as soft as a breath. I tried to stop him. My heart pounded. "What do you mean?" She turned her gaze back to the window. "He wasn't right from the beginning. Always angry. Always quiet. Until he wasn't. He used to hurt the neighbor's cat. Then lied to my face about it. He was 7. Evan. I tried to get him help. Took him to a doctor once. They said he was misunderstood. That he needed structure." She shook her head, almost laughing. "By the time George left me, Dale was already gone. Not physically, but inside. I saw things, Mabel. Things no mother should see. But I couldn't stop him. And I never told anyone. I was too ashamed." I swallowed hard. "He hurt people," I said. "He hurt me." "I know," she whispered. "It was only a matter of time." I sat down across from her, my hands clenched in my lap. "You could have warned us." "I should have," she said. "But I thought maybe, just maybe, if someone else loved him, they could fix what I couldn't." She looked up at me, her eyes shining with regret. "I was wrong. And I'm sorry." For the first time, I saw her not as the woman who had come before me, but as a mother broken by her own silence. We said nothing else. I left her there, staring out at the parking lot like she was waiting for someone who never came. That evening I returned home and sat on my porch, the photo still tucked inside my purse. I hadn't just uncovered Dale's crimes. I had found their origin. But now I had to ask myself, was knowing his past supposed to change how I felt about the man? Could I still hate someone who was once a broken boy? I looked up at the stars. I wasn't sure. But what I was sure of was that Dale's story wasn't over. Because just as I turned to go back inside, my phone buzzed. It was a text. Block number. It read, "You think this is finished? Think again." The phone slipped from my hand and landed on the porch floorboards with a soft thud. I stared at the message for a long time, the words flashing like a siren in my mind. You think this is finished? Think again. Block number. No name. No timestamp. No way to trace it. But I knew exactly who it was from. Hell. I stood slowly, legs stiff from sitting too long, heart beating like a hammer in my chest. The sun had just dipped below the trees, casting long shadows across the lawn. The wind picked up, rustling the chimes I'd hung by the back door. For the first time since I started this battle, felt fear again. Because now I knew something I hadn't considered before. Dale had help. It wasn't possible otherwise. He was locked up. No access to phones. No access to email. Yet here I was, holding proof that someone on the outside was still carrying his message. That meant he still had control. Still had power. I walked inside and locked every window. Every door. I turned on every light. My hands were trembling as I pulled the curtains shut. Then I did what I always did when the world started to tilt. I called someone I trusted. Lacey. She answered on the third ring. Hey, Miss Mabel. Everything okay? No, I said quietly. I got a message. From Dale. There was silence on the line. Then, but he's in jail. Isn't he? Someone's helping him. She was quiet again, then spoke. You should know something, she said, voice low. The night before he was arrested, he got a phone call. I didn't hear the whole thing, but he mentioned a name. Caleb. Said something about keeping the files safe. I felt a chill run down my back. Did he say anything else? Yes. No. Just that if anything happened, Caleb would take care of the rest. Caleb. I didn't recognize the name. But I knew what it meant. Dale had planned for this. He knew there was a chance he'd get caught. He had a backup. Someone on the outside who would finish what he started. And now, that someone was reaching out. I thanked Lacey and hung up, my mind racing. I pulled out Dale's old notebook, the one the police had taken pictures of but returned to me since it didn't contain anything official. I hadn't looked at it since. I flipped through the pages. Mostly lists, ramblings, notes about my habits, my medication, the layout of the house. But then, near the back, I saw it. See, Wichita knows everything. Just a single line. Hey, Caleb. Was that him? I picked up the phone and called Thomas, the private investigator. I need you to look into someone, I told him. His name is Caleb. Possibly in Wichita. Connected to Dale. Got it, Thomas said. Give me a day. But we didn't have a day. Because that night someone tried to break into my house. It was just after midnight. The front gate creaked. My motion sensor light clicked on. And then I heard it, the sound of someone jiggling the back door handle. I didn't panic. I didn't scream. I picked up the small pistol George had given me 20 years ago, the one I kept in a locked drawer just in case. I stood by the door, hands steady. And I waited. The knob turned slowly, then stopped. Then a voice, low, muffled but unmistakable, whispered from the other side. I know what you did. A step. Then silence. By the time the police arrived, the man was gone. No fingerprints. No sign of forced entry. Just a single note taped to the back door. One lie and they'll all know who you really are. I read it once. Then again. Then I tore it in two. Because I wasn't afraid of lies anymore. I had already faced the worst truth a woman could live through. Now it was their turn to be afraid. Caleb thought he could scare me. He thought he could silence me like Dale tried to. But I had lived too long, lost too much, and come too far to let a shadow like him undo what I had built. In the morning I met with Braden. I gave him the photo of Dale and Virginia. I told him about Caleb. And I gave him the note from the back door. You need protection, he said. Witness protection even. You're in danger. No, I said. I'm in control. Because I didn't just want to survive Caleb. I wanted to bring him down the way I brought Dale down. Publicly. Permanently. And as I walked out of the station, the wind picked up behind me. Not a breeze. Not a gust. Storm. The kind that starts slow and ends in fire. The sky turned dark the next morning. Gray, thick, heavy with something that felt more like a warning than weather. I sat on my porch with a fresh cup of tea, watching the trees bend in the wind. Nature always knows when something wicked is coming. So did I. Braden called at 10:37 a.m. "We found him," he said. "Caleb." "Yeah." Full name Caleb Norris. 29. 2 priors. One for extortion, another for illegal surveillance. "We've linked him to Dale through an old halfway house they both lived in when Caleb was 19. I didn't say a word. Just listened. "He's been squatting in a condemned building downtown. We're watching him now." "Good," I said. "Because I want to be there when you bring him in." Braden sighed. "Mabel." "I'm not asking," I said. "I'm telling." There was a pause. Then he said, "1 hour. Meet me behind the station." I hung up and went back inside to change. I didn't dress fancy. I wore my oldest jeans, my softest sweater, and George's army jacket. The one that still smelled like pine wood and tobacco. The one that made me feel like I wasn't walking into this alone. Before I left, I slipped Dale's old flash drive into my purse. It wasn't just evidence. It was the key to breaking Caleb open. I met Braden behind the station. He didn't argue. He just opened the passenger door of his unmarked car and nodded. 10 minutes later, we pulled into the broken lot behind an old factory. Windows shattered, roof half collapsed, graffiti screaming from every wall. "There," Braden whispered, pointing to a side entrance. Caleb stood outside, leaning against a rusted beam, smoking something that didn't smell like tobacco. He was wiry, pale, eyes darting like a rabbit. He didn't see us coming. Braden moved first. Direct. "Caleb Norris," he called. The man turned fast, but not fast enough. Within seconds, he was on the ground, cuffed, yelling. "You can't prove anything. You don't know who you're messing with." Braden just looked at me. "You ready?" He nodded. He opened the back door and I stepped out, slow and steady. Caleb's eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw it. Recognition. "You," he spat. "You're the one." "Yes," I said. "And I have your file. All of it. Every message. Every threat. Every name." Dale whispered in the dark. His jaw clenched. "You think locking up one man makes you safe? There are others. People like Dale don't just vanish. They multiply." "Not if I shine a light on every one of them," I said. Braden pulled him up and shoved him into the car. Later that afternoon, I sat in front of the town press. Just a folding table, a microphone, and a few reporters. Nothing flashy. Just truth. "I'm not here as a victim," I said into the mic. "I'm here as a woman who was quiet for too long." I told them about Dale. About Caleb. About the system that failed not just me but many others. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I stood tall and spoke for every woman who had ever been told to be polite, to stay silent, to move on. The story aired that night on the local news. By morning, I had messages from women across the state. Strangers, survivors, mothers, daughters. Each one saying the same thing. "Thank you for speaking. But with light comes shadows." And one of those shadows came in the form of a letter the very next day. No return address. No name. Just one sentence, typed in bold. "If you keep talking, someone else will bleed." I didn't flinch. I didn't call the police. I called the shelter in Wichita, the same one that had invited me to speak. "I'm ready," I said. "Book me. Anywhere. Freewhere. As many women as you can gather. Because threats don't silence me anymore. They wake me up." And now I was fully awake. But the final twist hadn't come yet. Because that night, while going through the rest of Dale's things one last time, I found a letter I hadn't seen before. Tucked inside a book. Handwritten. Not by Dale. By George. And what he confessed inside that letter shook me to my very soul. The paper was thin. Folded twice. Yellowing at the edges. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Elegant, slanted cursive I hadn't seen in over 15 years. George had never been a man of many words, But when he wrote, it meant something. The envelope had no postage, no date, just my name, Mabel, written in black ink. I unfolded it with shaking hands. My dearest Mabel, if you're reading this, then something has happened that I hoped never would. I've hidden this letter for years, praying it'd never be needed. But deep down, I knew Dale's darkness couldn't stay buried forever. There's something I never told you. Dale isn't just my son. He's the result of something terrible, a mistake, and a secret that I've carried since I was a young man. Virginia, my ex-wife, she wasn't well. She drank. She fought. But what most people never knew was that she was also violent behind closed doors. She hurt me, Mabel, in ways a man doesn't talk about. And one night, when I tried to leave her for good, she forced herself on me. Months later, she told me she was pregnant. I was angry, scared. But I stayed because I thought I had to. I thought maybe love would grow. But it didn't. And when Dale was born, he never looked at me like a son should. He looked cold. When I finally left her, I never looked back. I told myself that blood didn't matter, that evil couldn't be passed down. But the day you married me and Dale came to live with us, that coldness was still in him. I saw it again, and it terrified me. I should have told you then. But I was ashamed. Ashamed that I'd been a victim. Ashamed that my silence helped create the man he became. I know you. I know your heart. I know you'd find the truth one day. I just pray that when you do, you forgive me for the years I let fear speak louder than love. I never wanted you to fight this battle. But if you are, then I hope you fight like I always knew you could. With strength, with grace, and with fire. George. I read it once. Then pressed it to my chest and wept. Not just for what George went through. Not just for the secret he carried. But because I finally understood. Dale was born from violence. Raised in chaos. Twisted by silence. And yet, none of that excused the pain he caused. But it explained it. And in some strange, heartbreaking way. It freed me. Because I had spent so long asking why. Why he chose me. Why he hated me. Why he did what he did. And now, he knew. He was a legacy of pain. But I chose to end that legacy. I folded the letter and placed it in my Bible. Right next to Psalm 46. God is within her, she will not fall. That evening, I took the podium at the Wichita Women's Shelter. Hundreds of women. Some young. Some gray like me. All of them holding stories behind their eyes. And I spoke the truth. I told them about Dale. About Caleb. About the night I thought I might never find peace again. And then I told them about George. About silence. About the cost of secrets. And finally I told them the most important thing. You don't have to carry what broke you. The room was silent. Then came the applause. But I wasn't looking for praise. I was looking for change. And I saw it. In their eyes, their tears, their nods. After the talk, a young woman hugged me and said, "You made me believe I can survive." And I held her tight and whispered, "You already have." Now I sit on my porch most mornings, tea in hand, wind in my hair. I'm not hiding. I'm not afraid. And when people walk by and ask, "Is it really true? All that happened?" I just smile and say, "I lived it. And I'm still here." Because in the end, I didn't just take revenge on Dale. I destroyed the silence that made him. And in doing so, I saved more than just myself. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful, emotional story like this one. And let us know in the comments, where are you watching from and what part of this story hit you the hardest? We want to hear from you. Thank you for being with me through the storm.